There's two boys. They are. I can't remember what they are. Very, very nice. Nice boys. Very nice boys.
All right, it is 5:45. We'll call the meeting to order. And start with roll call.
Amy Little Swanson.
Here.
Mark Hillman.
Here.
Angie Skillings. Carl Palmer.
Here.
Dave Smith.
Here.
Dominique Stewart. Here. Rachel Henderson.
Here.
Dale Welke.
Here.
Andrew Kirby.
We have a quorum. Stand for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The school district of the Menomonie area, by embracing the unique needs and using the strengths of our diverse community, is dedicated to preparing all students to become lifelong learners, caring individuals, and responsible citizens. Do we have any revisions to the agenda order? Seeing none, we'll move on to community communications. Community communications is a time to air concerns and express your opinions on issues. There should be no negative or personal attacks against any individuals, including staff, board members, or administrators. The opinions, beliefs, and viewpoints expressed by the various speakers do not necessarily reflect the opinions, beliefs, or viewpoints of individual board members, the board as a whole, or the school district of the Menomonie area, nor do they reflect the policies of the SDMA. We have 3 speakers tonight, and first up is Josie Pillman.
Brian is here. No big deal.
I'm Josie Hillman, and I live in that. School board members, this is about Steve. Boys become men during their years in the Menomonie High School, at least we hope they do. U.S. Senator Josh Hawley, the senior senator from the state of Missouri, has recently written a book titled Manhood, the Masculine Virtues America Needs. This book contains some helpful insights as to how we help those boys pass into manhood. I would encourage all male teachers to take a look. It wouldn't hurt for all on the school board to also get the book to read. So how do our teachers and our curriculum help to encourage our boys to become outstanding husbands and fathers? We want boys with strength of character who are able to pass through the rite of passage from boys to men. Men with skills to provide for their families, men with moral purity, who know how to protect women and children, who have a strong work ethic, who know how to create and work hard even when that is difficult, who know how to persevere and not give up. Men with the character to get up and try again when they fail. Women appreciate men who know how to do things and who are motivated to get up early and have a vision to create a legacy for their families. When men marry and begin a family, they begin to mature. Holding a wife and then a baby in their arms helps them move quickly from a boy to the role of a man. Here in the Menomonie High School, we want to prepare those boys with knowledge and wisdom to become husbands and dads as they move through that rite of passage from boys to men. This is even more important when those boys are being raised in a fatherless home. The daily example is not seen. Our male teachers can be a great help to lay the groundwork for this rite of passage from boys to men. There are a lot of things that help boys become men, and I believe the character of our own male teachers and staff at the Menomonie High School can be a good example to our boys becoming men of high character. School board, when you are checking out new male hires, please conscientiously choose those of top character and help our boys become men.
Thank you. Next up, we have Danny Missing. Yes, sorry.
Hello, dear Menomonie School Board. My name is Danny Gibson. I live at 1710 5th Street, Menomonie, Wisconsin. I am talking today to thank you for your continued support for keeping books in the library throughout the district. is disheartening to hear and see all the harmful propaganda that community members in the district who are trying to dictate what materials students can have access to. Yes, I do not have any children in the school district, so my voice only has so much merit. But as an educator, it is very important to me that children have access and resources that can validate and affirm their identity. Myself and a couple other community members have began a letter drafted being currently sent around the school district community to thank the school district, school board, and reconciliation committee for continued support keeping books, in particular the LGBTQ books in the district library. There is currently over 60 signatures as of 5 p.m. today, and continue to get people signing as well. I truly believe that we cannot get any book, even if the topic makes someone else uncomfortable. In order to learn and grow, we must feel we need a uncomfortable moment, and if we begin to censor materials for everyone, we will start to conform and have similarities to how the Nazi Party began. However, it has been told numerous times, a parent and or guardian can request certain books and materials from a child not to be checked out from the library. So once again, I want to thank the school district and the school board for the continued support and efforts in keeping everyone's First and Right Amendment in mind. Thank you and happy Pride Month.
Thank you. And last we have Joyce Wheeler.
It appears, Judge Euler, Menomonie. It appears in agenda item 4D today that you will be considering an SEL survey for the district. The specifics are not public on board docs, so I have to guess as to what's about to happen. I believe that Castle, through its influence in this multi-billion-dollar social emotional learning industry, is not our friend. One issue with SEL surveys is data mining of students. These harmless seeming, vaguely worded mental health, how's it going for you surveys, are creating a possibly permanent mental health profile that is being stored somewhere and that may follow the students throughout their lives, like a badly advised picture on social media. How well do you handle anger, little Johnny? Let's just write that down. What started as trauma care for individual students a few years ago has now become new and improved transformative SEL. A cuddly lion cub turned hungry predator. SEL survey results are interpreted through a social justice CRT lens against Castle's self-determined 5 goals. For example, if all the students did not, almost always, care for other people's feelings or feel hopeful, is that a problem that requires mental health intervention? SEL companies declaring all students to be at risk because of the survey responses can probably get you lots of grant money. Then you can give that government money back to Castle and other SEL companies for their products and services. What a business model. One school district that has not been helped by SEL is Chicago. The Chicago figures show much worse English and math proficiency, and they've used SEL for 10 years. And to deal with the entire student body's at-risk diagnosis, SEL methodology infused into every aspect of the student's day leads to psychological intervention on the entire student population by all school personnel, from teachers to basketball coaches, without proper licenses and without parental knowledge, and this is a lawsuit waiting to happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, we have personnel consent agenda with nothing on the agenda, so we don't need to. All right, moving on to the action agenda. Our first item is approval of the preliminary budget for 2023-2024. Entertain a motion to approve the budget, preliminary budget.
So moved.
Motion by Abe, second by Amber. Any discussion on the preliminary budget? Or Joe, do you want to start?
Yeah, actually, the board has spent a lot of time reviewing the preliminary budget, and this is what will be published for the annual meeting. Just as a disclaimer that we've said every single time, this is a work in progress. We won't actually know our actual budget figures until October, after we know our September enrollment, we know property valuation for the school district. There's a lot of pieces to this puzzle, but this is the process that schools follow. Leah has done a great job working with our principals, our directors, our teachers, our staff to develop the preliminary budget. There have been significant changes since the last time the board reviewed this a couple weeks ago. Leah, could you point out a couple of those changes, and then I want to just make a couple comments more generally about the budget.
So this, the biannual budget, they came to an agreement at the state level, and so we updated our budget for next year, reflecting on those changes. And those are adding on the $325 per pupil increase on the revenue limits, and then increasing the low revenue ceiling from 10,000 to 20,000, and then increasing our special education aid. And you'll see in the notes that it's increasing at 32%, which you might have heard or saw on the BPI website, and news that it's 33.3%. But special education aid is based on actual costs from the prior year. Since we don't know what our actual costs yet are going to be, we base our estimate on the budget, which typically is maybe a little bit higher than what we think our actual costs will be. That's why the amount built into the budget is 32%. But there again, that will be updated in the fall when we have a better estimate.
So like Leah said, we did make changes based on the news that's been coming out of Madison, but we also know that what's happening in Madison is not 100% locked in. There are some shared revenue pieces that have already gone through. I did notice today that there has been a veto threat based on what's happening at higher education. So again, this is our best estimate. We need to have something published for the annual meeting. We'll provide the best update we can in August for the annual meeting, and then ultimately the school board at the end of October will consider the final budget. But saying all this, I think there's a couple things that board members and the public should be aware of. When we first started looking at early estimates back in February and March, we were extremely concerned about the fiscal cliff facing us because of the ending of the COVID pandemic relief funding. And at that time, we thought our worst case scenario for next year was about $6 million. And we knew that that was a very worst case scenario. With these more recent changes, that number has dropped down to about $3.7 million deficit for next year. And again, that's worst case scenario. We do budget conservatively. We know that it's important that we have the resources available for our kids. We also don't want to be mid-year and then all of a sudden have a big surprise for everyone. So I would say that the 3.7 is a conservative estimate. The other thing that's changed, in addition to now estimating more revenue from the state, is as we begin to wrap up the 2022-2023 school year, there are several areas of our budget where our staff has done a terrific job, like they have for years and years, where we have underspent the budget. And what we are now hopeful for is that we should be able to carry forward some of the pandemic aid that does not need to be spent until 2024. So somewhere in the approximation of about $2 million, maybe up to $2.5 million, we're hoping to be able to not use that pandemic aid and use it and apply it towards next year's budget deficit. So next year is looking much better than it was when we first started talking about this budget back in February and March, but we still are projecting a deficit. We still know that the amount of revenue is not sufficient for the amount of expenses that we have with the services that we're currently providing. I still would estimate, even if we are able to carry forward some of the pandemic relief funding for next year, that still creates our own local fiscal cliff, whether it be 2 million or 2.5 million. So I still would project that our board, the board is gonna have to make a real tough decision here, whether we look at additional revenue through a referendum, most likely in the spring of 2024, or we would have to look at reducing services. So I think that's more of a discussion for a future time. Real soon though, I mean, I think we all know the deadlines are gonna quickly approach, but I would anticipate a referendum in the spring of 2024 for the 24-25 budget, but for 23-24, things are looking much better. Any questions?
I just wanted to, so just to clarify, you said, there's maybe some carryover funds we've preserved and might be able to kind of blend things out, but that's still a one-time carryover. So in 18 months, we'd be, again, in that situation where we think, what are we gonna do with this $2 million, that we didn't have last year? So it's just kind of smoothing out the cliff a little bit, it's not making it go away.
And I think we called it a bridge. We were looking for ways to bridge our budget for 2022, 2023. And we anticipated our staff would do a great job with that, and the board has made other wise decisions that put us in a position to do that. So I'm very pleased that that bridge has been essentially built. The challenge is that, like you said, we have a structural deficit, but the beauty of the bridge is that we won't have to deplete all of these other resources we have in the district if a referendum is sought in 2024, because that revenue then would essentially fill that gap in 24-25. So we bridged ourselves through the tough water. Now it's time to plan ahead. Now that we, especially it's a 2-year budget at the state, we really will have a pretty good idea of what it's going to look like, and the board should be able to make a pretty informed decision later this fall.
Thanks.
I'd just like to say that besides this, there was something else that came out with this budget too, and I just want people to be aware of it, that they're increasing voucher schools, and that our district spends about $500,000, if I'm not right, if I'm correct. And just a few years ago it was $300,000, and it keeps going up and up. And that's money that comes right off the Fund 10, general fund, and so that hurts public schools a lot. And of course, there's some people that can say, well, whatever. And I am for school choice. There's nothing wrong with school choice. But I don't appreciate the fact that our tax money goes to schools that are religious, that separation of church and state. Plus, they're giving them a lot more money than what the tuition is. For instance, a school here can charge $3,000 for a year for a student to go, but then the state gives like $10,000 or $11,000 for that student, and so the school is actually making a profit. Just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
So I'm just to make sure I understand, I read a lot about the kind of preliminary budget deal. Just to make sure I understand. So $325 per pupil increase, it sounds like more or less we're probably, assuming this deal is correct, right, that does multiply by number of students, it's 1.2-ish million, is that right? Roughly, or?
Yeah, 2.4.
Oh, 2.4, okay. So, and then, but then the low revenue ceiling from 10 to 11, that depends on the levy and other factors. So can you elaborate a little bit on how that 10 to 11 affects us in a practical way, or is it too hard to take it?
Sure. Normally, our low revenue ceiling is around 10 points, $10,150. So we are increasing up to 11,000 per member. So multiply that out times all of our student membership, then our low revenue ceiling allocation is going up significantly, about $591, I think it is per member.
But even with that, there's a formula in the revenue limit worksheet, and you have a 3-year average on your enrollment. It's not necessarily the number of students, because some students, like 4K students, are counted at 0.6, not 1.0. There's a whole range of factors that go into this, but I think Leah has done a good job laying it out, how it totals up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did go through the worksheet, but don't understand all the lines. So, So just to summarize what I think you said, Joe, the worst case we had thought was roughly 6 million in the hole, and now it's more like 3.7-ish, but that's, again, an estimate, of course. And I noticed in the budget estimate, in the budget, the summary document. Yeah, so when I look at, so I'm looking at the budget summary, revised budget summary document, Fund 10. So the change there is like minus 4.6 million, and the debt service is minus 2.1 million versus the previous year. So that Fund 10 line is still essentially that, is where that 6 and 3.7 million sort of live, right? We ignore the expense side. The revenue change from, which is taking us from 6 to 3.7, is wrapped up in the Fund 10 almost entirely. Is that correct?
That is Fund 10 entirely, and that is, the revenues are decreasing and our expenditures are increasing.
Exactly.
And the
It's always two sides of the
difference.
So I just want to make sure I can remind those numbers. Thank you so much.
So, and I should have probably thought to send this question earlier, so if there isn't an answer, I totally understand. On paper, everyone's saying, hey, the state gave us more money, they gave us an increase, right? But we know with historically what's happened with inflation and not keeping up. How far off is this from where it would have been without, if they would have caught up to inflation, right? Are we halfway there? I'm not looking for like a super detailed answer, but.
I would be hesitant to say half or a third, but I'll tell you it's not enough. And we knew that going in, even with the governor's original budget proposal, it was not going to be enough to fill the gap, to fix the fiscal cliff, and then provide an inflationary increase. That did not happen, and it's not going to happen.
I just had a couple of clarifying questions. So the estimate we're looking at to approve tonight does or does not include the carried over ESSER funds?
Right now, it does not.
Does not, okay. I just wanted to understand that. And then with respect to the, maybe this is too much in the weeds, but with respect to the 325 and then the $10,000 to $11,000 ceiling, is it not the case that because our revenue limit was so low, that like that ceiling jump supersedes the 325 for us in the first year of the biennium, or no?
I would just say that our new revenue per FTE will be higher than some districts that are already above the low revenue ceiling. And back in the early 90s, when they set their revenue limits, essentially they set them at whatever spending level school districts were at. So it was very inequitable. Some schools, they get up to $20,000 per FTE, whereas like Leah said, in Menomonie, we're about $10,100 per FTE. This will bring us up to $11,000 per FTE, which is still lower than a number of schools in the state, but it definitely makes it more competitive.
Thank you. Any other questions on the preliminary budget? All right, let's vote. And motion passes 8-0. Next up, we have changes to the employee handbook for 2023-24. Entertain a motion to approve these changes. So moved.
Second.
Moved by Dominique, second by Carl. Any discussion, or Joe or Sam, do you want to talk about them at all?
The board already reviewed these at the last meeting. I also want to point out that all these changes were sent to staff. I did not receive any comments back. So our recommendation remains that the board approve these changes for next year.
I have a very minor clarifying question that I think was answered last time. I just forgotten what the answer was. The comment about benefits during leave, does that apply to FMLA leave, or is that only other sorts of leave? There's, the statement is, employees are required to pay the full premium benefits for unpaid absences, prorated, paid and month, et cetera. So how does that interact with family medical leave day?
That is outside of that amount.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions or comments about the employee handbook? Then let's vote. We have the handbook revisions approved unanimously. All right, next on the action agenda, approve revisions to policy 163, school board memberships.
I make a motion that we delete NSBA from the policy and leave it empty as to which organization needs to be.
Just to clarify, you don't mean fully empty, just
To
deleting
join the
that line.
national organization.
Right, but leaving the other organizations that are listed in 163. Thank you.
Good.
Okay. Motion second. Motion by Carl, second by Dale. Thank you. Discussion on this.
Rachel, I'd just like to point out that this item has been talked about over and over and over. It was tabled, so it's been a little while. And what we found through our research with WASB, the School Board Association for the state, is that really it's the School Board Association that gets these memberships for school districts. There is a possibility for school districts to join NSBA without being a WASB member. I don't know of any that have done that. So I think the motion made by Carl and seconded by Abe makes a lot of sense. Through our affiliation with WASB, we'll also be affiliated with the consortium of state school boards. There will be national representation for schools. And if we see the need in the future to specifically call out them or someone else, we can always bring the policy back for revision again.
Thanks for that. That makes a lot of sense. And just to clarify, it was seconded by Dale.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So procedurally, my understanding is if we do make this change, we must be part of a national organization, but to change organization in the future, we wouldn't need to change policy. It would just be a simple vote of the board at an appropriate time, correct?
Nothing that happens tonight would preclude the board one way or another from being part of it.
And this may streamline is what I'm saying.
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments about this policy change? Then let's vote. Yeah, oh, sorry, let's do a voice vote.
Amber Kirsting. Yes. Carl Palmer.
Yes.
Amy Riddle Swanson.
Yes.
Dave Smith.
Yes.
Dominique Stewart.
Yes.
Dale Velke.
Yes.
Rachel Henderson.
Yes.
Mark Hillman.
Yes.
And so that motion passes, I think. All right, moving on to the discussion agenda. First, we have a report on summer maintenance.
So I'll introduce you, Kevin. I think everyone knows who you are, but just in case, Kevin Tomaszewski is our Director of Buildings and Grounds for the school district. I appreciate all his work, and Kevin is here tonight to give the board his most recent update on the summer work plan.
So I basically supplied a bullet point to-do list that's on my desk for you guys today. So I'm going to go down in no particular order. Starting out with probably our most visible job that's happening right now over at the high school, working on the construction of the new building, which will house the concessions and the restrooms for the sports complex. Project is going very well, in my opinion, and we're still on track to hit a target of being complete somewhere in the month of August this year. They are currently working on the interior development, so it's moving along there. Jumping over to Oak Lawn for a minute, we're going to pull out all the hand wash stations outside of the students' restrooms in the hallways and replace those. Like many things on this list, there's a little bit of a lead time involved, so the latest accurate is early to mid-August for getting those fixtures in. Hopefully we can still get the plumbers here before school starts to get those installed. Elevator modernization. This and the next couple projects, we're kind of holding until July comes so we can really get going on these. Once the 1st of July is here, they'll start ordering supplies. There's going to be a little bit of lead time. There's a lot of electronics and hydraulics involved. Basically, working on the equipment room with elevator number 3, modernizing it and bringing it up to code. Also at the high school, pool upgrades. We're going to work on finalizing our design this summer, get a bidding document ready to go, and our target date for this is going to be about March of 24. It's going to be a fairly extensive job, structural repairs to the floor, tile at the pool deck, filtration system, bleachers, and reclocking the pool room exterior. Over at the middle school, a couple jobs, doors. We'll be pulling out 6 doors, 3 frames, replacing them with all the related hardware that'll go with the doors. And then a couple small repairs to existing doors. And carpet replacement also at the middle school. So we recently did the main office area. This is behind the main office. The smaller office is conference room, that area of the school. And a couple jobs we normally do every year, gym floors. We'll be refinishing the middle school and the high school this year. And some basic parking lot maintenance at Knapp and River Heights for crack sealing and painting the lines. So those are all the larger projects. Next are the things that our maintenance staff will be working on. So, like previous summers, we have a lot of work to do in the middle school storage shed. It is full to capacity. We accumulated a lot of older desks during the pandemic that we need to clear out of there to make room for the things that the district wants to keep. So we've started taking those desks apart. That'll probably last all summer. Kind of fit that in between our normal day-to-day repairs. Couple small things, just going around doing our pothole patrol, as I call it. Athletic field maintenance, even our new synthetic turf, we still have about every 2-3 weeks we'll run a sweeper over it, so there's still some maintenance involved there. And then just keeping the lines established on our natural turf fields so we don't have to start from scratch when fall sports start. Last on the maintenance list, environmental site. We've already been out a couple times doing some trail maintenance. I know a group of 3 went out last week with mowers, trimmers, and chainsaws, starting to clear up some of those trails. So we'll continue to work on that throughout the summer. Custodial staff will be doing their typical summer duties. Deep clean pretty much sums up what they do. They'll go into their classrooms, empty them out, take care of the floors that need attention, put everything back in, clean as they go. All furniture gets clean, high touch surfaces, things like that. We also try to do a little decluttering in the process where we can, and we take advantage of the summer to do one of our HVAC filter changes in the schools as well. As far as our seasonal staffing goes for the summers, we have a full grounds crew, so we have 3 staff on board. We're fortunate where we have returning, I think pretty much every summer that I've been here, we've had the same group. So they know our grounds, which is very helpful. They're very efficient. They do a nice job. They take care of all 7 schools, the district office, the environmental site, and a couple other little spots around town. So they have a lot of grounds to cover. We also have 1 painter on board. So we started over at Wakanda. Basically, our summer painters just primarily touch-up work. Once in a while, we'll go in and do complete rooms. But we spent a couple weeks at Wakanda so far this year, and we've moved on to the middle school now. And we'll keep going for the remainder of the summer. My last entry here is project planning. This is just a little tidbit of some of the things I'll be working on this summer. So in addition to kind of keeping on top of what we talked about so far, it's only 2023, but I'm working on gathering information for the 24-25 projects. So throughout the summer, I'll be looking into some of those potential projects. Some of the things on my radar right now are track resurfacing, tennis courts at the high school, the bus loop over at River Heights, including the sidewalks, LED lighting, trading in a vehicle, and hopefully I'll have plenty of information gathered in time for the January 30-year plan update. So that's the to-do list for this year.
Not sure. Thank you. I'll just say I don't work or spend my day inside the schools, but I find every one of our buildings just to be really a pleasant place to be. And I know that that's in large part thanks to all of your work, so I appreciate all you do. Any questions?
I have seen your grounds crew out, and they are a grounds crew, man. It's like watching NASCAR or.
I saw them at work in Downsville today too.
Yeah, they work hard. And, I pick up my kids from events or whatever, and they're out working, doing a good job, so.
My question is, do you have enough staff to cover everything to make sure everything gets done?
Oh, I could use triple.
You ever like hire like high school kids or kids to like volunteer or help out if they need that?
I don't think we have done that in my time, no.
Just curious. Thank you.
Go ahead, Nick.
At the environmental site, the building maintenance, any specifics on that?
So just some minor things, I know it needs a couple new ceiling fans inside, we just like to go through the buildings, look for any repairs that need to be made. There's something with the shutters, I know we got a couple of them opened up. And the final thing that's on my to-do list would be work on those bridges, some of them are starting to settle a little bit. I'm a little concerned about us building too many bridges over the moving water, but if there's something we can do to make them safer, I think that's gonna be the first step.
Thank you very much. And next discussion item is the Education for Employment Plan.
So Brian, and I see that he has a couple of our teachers here also, Mr. Sterry and Mrs. Zadowski. Come on up. Brian, go ahead and take it over.
All right, well, thank you very much. Yes, I'm happy to have Ryan Sterry, our career and tech ed coordinator, as well as Jill Zadowski, our transition coordinator for the district, joining for the presentation. I'm going to give just a very brief background on what Ed for Employment is for our newer board members, but then also just to transition us into the report. So Ed for Employment has been around for quite a while. You can see it started back in 1985, and I did a quick calculation before I sat down this evening. In one form or another, I've been involved with Ed for Employment in 4 different districts since 1998, so 25 years. It was created in response to concern with struggles that youth in the United States were having in making a successful transition from school to post-secondary endeavors, whether that be the workforce or a post-secondary education through or 4-year college. So Ed for Employment is something that requires an annual review and ultimately approval by the Board of Education. So this is a report that will come back to you for approval in the first meeting of the new academic year, which is the first meeting in July. So a few highlights related to Ed for Employment before I turn things over to Mrs. Zadowski. The report that you have has not changed drastically from last year's report, so I'm not going to go through each of the slides. The main highlights, we've updated the post-secondary enrollment trends. You can see that data lags because we don't know where the class of 2023 is going yet. We will learn that a year from now. So that data lags, but we have updated it to represent the most recent information that's available. We've also, and that's on slides 9 through 10. We've updated our articulated course lists that are linked on slide 13. And then we added a couple of slides specific to dual enrollment opportunities as well as industry certifications. And Mr. Sterry will talk a little bit about some of those things. But some highlights related to dual enrollment before I turn things over. Dual enrollment is where students receive credit for the work they do while in high school, but then also they receive post-secondary credit, either through a 4-year or a 2-year school. And when we take a look at the most recent data that's available, in the past year, we had a total of 434 dual enrollment credits in the school district of the Menomonie area high school level. be that through AP courses, UW Scout, CBTC. We had some students that took some coursework through UW-Madison as well. In addition, if you take a look at our combined totals for youth apprenticeships, industry recognized certifications, and state certified skills co-ops from the 2021-22 school year, we had 92 students who were involved in some aspect of those programs. And then our 22-23 data will be finalized a little bit later on this year. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Mr. Sterry and Mrs. Zadowski to talk a little bit about some of our academic and career planning activities that are part of that firm.
Sure. Do you want to start? Sure. Yeah, okay. Well, a lot of this education for employment report really boils down to academic and career planning and being specific, and so that way, we're allowing kids to participate in activities, so when they get out of high school, they're both college and career ready and can hopefully make informed decisions on post-secondary training that's going to lead to a career that they can make a good living at, and they understand what is involved with that career. It's something that they're gonna enjoy. So some of the things that we do in our academic and career planning activities is we do meet as a group. We have a committee that Casey oversees. We meet once a month. Within the academic and career planning activities, and students, they participate in a number of assessment activities through a statewide program called STELL, which I think are very good activities and relevant, that hopefully helps determine some of the things that students may be interested in, what their skill sets are, so they can also be hopefully realistic in jobs and careers that would fit them. And then this also, with our career chats and our field trips, and Jill can talk a little bit more about that, and community partnership events, leads to relevant course planning for our kids. So that way when they sit down with their guidance staff, that hopefully they're making informed decisions and taking classes that they can now see the relevance in. For instance, say somebody that's going to be a general contractor in construction understands the importance of clear technical reading and writing and being able to put together professional looking bid, and hopefully making those courses relevant to students like that. That would be just a simple example of that. Some of our other activities, like Brian already touched on, would be specific academic career planning things would be articulated coursework. We're continuing to add articulated courses so students can earn college credit while they're still in high school, saving them both time and money when they do hit the post-secondary world. And a lot of these have now been organized into full academies. We have a CNA academy, we have healthcare, pre-nursing healthcare academy, as well as a business management academy, so kids can actually earn these credentials while still in high school. And eventually many of these students will go on to participate then in their senior internship programs where we've had very, very strong enrollments. And they can get out into a capstone experience where they're going to be working part of the day in entry-level employment that they may be interested in, and then hopefully those things also lead to industry credentials, where then we can use those industry credentials for a lot of grant writing activities that bring in hopefully a lot of money to our schools. So Jill will let you touch base on
So I'm Jill Zadowski, and I'm the transition coordinator at the high school. And I spoke 3 years ago, I believe, and so a lot of you are new. So I just want to explain what my role is, because it's not a typical teacher role. I work in the special education department at the high school. All the students in special education figure out what they want to do after high school. So it starts 9th grade through 12th grade. I really focus on the juniors and seniors. And so instead of me working in my own kind of area, I've kind of partnered with Ryan so we can work together to bring experiences to all students at the high school. So Ryan and I are going to be participating in a virtual course through DPI. It's a career and life readiness course that wants special educators and CTE coordinators to work together. We're also active members of the Workforce and Education Committee through the Chamber of Commerce. So through that committee, we brought Menomonie back to the high school this year, which had been on pause for a while with COVID, and the Youth Career Expo, which was nice to get back in person. Last year we got it in person, but this year I'd say it doubled in size. And we continue to explore other options of making that event even bigger. We also participated in the Chippewa Valley Youth Apprentice Interview Day. It was in Chippewa Falls this year, where we brought, I think, 5 or 6 students to Chippewa Falls and they interviewed. We helped prepare resumes, cover letters, and talked about what to wear. And then they got to sit down with different businesses for that interview day. We are going to try to participate in that again this upcoming school year. We're also always are looking at other events. We found out about Build My Future event, which is an interactive construction event at the St. Croix Fairgrounds, and we're going to be taking a busload of 50 students there this October. We're trying to increase our hands-on opportunities for students, and that's why we're trying to work together doing that. And we also continue our partnerships with the community by meeting with businesses, bringing them in for career chats where students come in, listen to that business, ask questions. We're continually working with CBTC to find other offerings that can interest a variety of students.
Okay, so questions? I have a question about the pre-nursing academy. Is that through the science department? How many kids are involved? Is it going to be extra staff, extra courses?
Sure. Yeah, it's going to be a total of, I believe, 4 to 5 different courses on that. I'd have to look at the specifics. It isn't going to involve any extra staff members. It's also going to include a CNA program. So students that are interested in going into anything related to healthcare can participate in that program. And I believe right now we have, I'd have to look at the exact numbers, about 15 to 20 students that are interested in that. So CBTC came to us and asked us about the program. We thought it might be a natural fit because we already had a number of those classes transcripted. We're also funding that CNA program. And to answer your question on that, Dale, like with their CNA instructor, we actually fund that program through the CTE incentive grant. So part of these industry credentials that are on one of the slides with this E4E report, we had almost this year projected to have, I believe, 108 students that learn industry credentials. And that's a grant that I oversee. And from that grant, then we get dollars back from the state. And that's how we fund that CNA class. And it's actually been a little bit of it's brought in dollars to our program, because I believe tuition is $400 or $500. And then when students earn their CNA certification, it would be close to $1,000, up to $1,000 if you get back from that grant. And that's been, Brian and Dr. Zadowski would oversee that. And the dollars have been going back to career and technical education and split up amongst the departments for furthering programs like that.
There was an article in one of the email things we get this week highlighting a school that had a nursing academy. Oh, okay, so we're doing that. You know. Maybe I asked this last year, whether has there been discussion of possibly a teaching pre-academy? Like my youngest is thinking, oh, I'm going to be a teacher someday. We know we have a shortage in the industry. Has that been brought up?
Well, CBTC has been, there has been talk of offering courses related to that. I know Ms. DeLong has started she started a teaching club for students that are interested in becoming teachers to hopefully establish that pipeline. So those are a couple things. Is that what it's called, Stan? Yeah.
The program referred to as Educators Rising. And the nice thing about the partnership we have with CBTC is we have been able to expand our program offerings when the time is right for us. We've taken a look at, we have scenarios where we have enough students that would warrant offering the coursework, at the same time making sure that it fits within the scope and sequence that we have in place, so we're not replacing or duplicating something we already have in doing that.
And if I could just chime in more specific to Carl's question, some of the other things that our district has done is we do have students that get experiences through the summer school program. We've had some very successful experiences there. Also, we've had students through the internship program work as teacher assistants, perhaps at elementary school and middle school, mostly elementary. So there are feeder program types of activities in place. I wouldn't say it's on the same level as an academy, but I think there's plenty of opportunity for students who are interested in that field.
There's no other questions. We will move on to the Human Resources report.
So our Director of Human Resources, Samantha White, report for the board. And while Sam gets her information ready, I just want to point out that as the board knows, we have never been so busy with HR as we have been in recent years. One, because of the pandemic and all the shifts there. Also the natural demographics, we all saw this coming, not only in education, but across the nation and across the Midwest, especially with the demographics changing in our communities. And then when you throw on top of that a shortage of qualified teaching candidates, it's been a lot of work for our HR department, and I really appreciate the work that Sam and her team has done. So Sam, go ahead and take it away.
Sure, thank you. So the report was very similar to last year, at least in format, just so that you can get those comparisons from year to year. I think that that's important to kind of see that historical view. And so at the top, you're going to notice a little bit of a difference. We're up a few staff members from last year. About half of our staff members have worked for the SDMA for less than 5 years, and about 30% have worked for 10 years or more. So just looking at the differences there. Moving on to the actual numbers, our teacher numbers have stayed pretty much the same. You'll notice that with the grid that I have, excuse me, on there, they're a little bit lower down. That we had those years during COVID where we hired extra staff, and so now that seems to have kind of leveled out. Back to maybe where we were closer to pre-pandemic. We have hired more school nutrition employees and more para-educators. So those support staff people being very important and critical to the success of our district. We also, I included this time, separated out 5 health assistants. So during the pandemic, we had hired some contact tracers, we had hired an additional nurse, and felt the need to kind of continue with that. Health assistants really do take a load off of our clerical at each of the buildings. So we currently have one at the high school, one at the middle school, and then one at each of our elementary buildings as well. So moving on again, just looking at that grid, you can see the breakdown then for each of the numbers, and then the 0 to 5, 5 to 10, 11 to 15, 16 to 20, and 20 plus years. We're seeing a bit of a decrease in those staff members that have the experience, and I think mostly just due to retirements. That's kind of where that's coming from. Looking at the exiting staff members, you can see also, I think last year there was a request to put some percentages in there, so I did add that for the 22-23 school year. So just so you know, that is the comparison for just this last year, not a comparison overall. But looking at some of the narrative at the bottom, you can see that that we had a lot less teachers leave this year. Overall, we had a substantial decrease in our staff that are leaving us, and so that's a really good thing because I think it's really helped to stabilize our workforce within the district. And I just point out the educational support specialist at the bottom. When you have 2 out of your 7 ESS people resign, that's where you get a number of 28%. So that's a small number. And those are partial day positions. So they're working maybe 3 hours a day. And so oftentimes people will come into those positions, kind of get their foot in the door, and then realize that they want more hours. And so they'll apply for, let's say, a para position that's a little bit more full-time, more hours. Looking at the reasons cited for teachers that are leaving, again, still seeing people, the majority of people leaving because they're moving closer to home or they're finding another position that is closer to where their family is. We did have a few people that left to pursue positions outside of education. And then of course we always have, some personal and health reasons. I also included a little bit of information about our exit survey, and so we do provide an opportunity for our staff members who are exiting to be able to give us some feedback. The survey consists of 18 questions asking about a variety of different things. This year we had 27 employees that completed that out of 44 that were sent the survey. So I do periodically, quite frequently actually look at that just to look for trends. And then our staff do have an opportunity to request a meeting with me if they want to do an in-person exit survey or exit meeting. And so that happens every once in a while, which is always very good information for me as well.
Can I ask a quick question? Well, sorry to interrupt. Am I correct in thinking that 27 out of 44 is a pretty substantial increase of people using the exit survey over previous years? Or
I didn't look at that number. I just looked at this year, but I can certainly pull that apart. It's an ongoing kind of running report, and so I have probably combined probably about 3 years of data. So I can pull those apart though and just take a look and see. We certainly have made more of an effort to make sure that that's completed or that that's at least given to people with enough time before their email address is turned off, and so that they have an opportunity to provide us with that feedback. We value that a great deal. And the scores are pretty good. Like I said, they range anywhere. It's a scale of 1 to 5. Our lowest score being a 3.5, 1, and then our highest score being a 4.69. So we look at each of those individually and kind of look for areas where we can do a better job, maybe training, if that's initial training is one of the questions. And so if we see that, then we try to target that a lot better. And then the final part of the report is the substitute report. And you can see, again, we had a slight increase in teacher substitutes over last year, and then we had a pretty substantial increase in support staff substitutes over last year. Last year, we did incorporate that bonus structure, and we pulled that back this year, just anticipating that we would have maybe more interest in subbing, especially with the economy, people looking for work and kind of periodic work where they maybe have a day or two in their schedule where they can sub. And so we had that certainly where people said, I'm off on Fridays, and so I can sub on Fridays, and that works out real well for us. The incentives that we do have in place, we have after completing 30 substitute positions or teaching assignments, they receive a $10 per day bonus that then just continues on as they continue to sub. And then they also get a free activities pass if they request that, and access to our pool and field house. Our teachers, our substitute teachers, can also receive a daily free lunch if they would like. And one thing too, just to note that many of our substitutes, our teacher substitutes, will also sub as paras, they'll sub as clerical, and so those numbers aren't going to exactly add up when you look at the chart at the bottom, because we count each of those kind of positions individually, or we count the support staff separate from the teachers. So we have a lot of subs that are willing to do a lot of extra teacher subs, I should say, that are willing to do more than just teacher positions. So that is the crux of my report. Questions?
Are substitutes an issue last year? Did you have trouble in some cases?
I would say yes, yep.
How does our sub-pay compare to surrounding districts?
We look at that pretty much every year. We're pretty much right in the middle. But it's interesting that it has, normally it's kind of a slower process where everybody kind of looks and then they increase a little bit. It was much more competitive last year, where you had mid-year people, school districts making changes to their sub-pay in an effort to, you know, pull from other districts.
I remember seeing, that's why I asked.
Yeah.
I remember seeing that mid-year.
Yeah, so I feel that we're very competitive. It really depends on who you're comparing us to. You know, Hudson is a very different market than we are, but then, you know, we're also, I think, right in the ballpark with like an Elk Mountain as well. So, and we have, most of our substitutes do sub in several different districts. We share a lot with Boyceville, with Eau Claire, with Elk Mountain.
One thing to point out though, and Sam, correct me if I'm wrong, but my recollection was when we had even more of a bonus structure in place, it didn't really change our pool very much. We were paying primarily the same people more,
Right.
but the pool is limited, no matter how much we pay,
Right.
to reasonable.
The people within our pool were very motivated by it. Like I had people calling and asking how many days and how many do I need to get to that next level. But I don't think that it was, it broadened our pool the way that we had hoped that it would.
My question has to do more with high school. I know they have that, teacher there, the person that comes in and has the, I guess, the shared classroom or someplace where they sit when they can't find a sub or, you know, whatever, so they come in there and they look into it and so forth. I'm wondering how that is going. Is that getting better, whether or not some of the kids in there during the day? I mean, hoping that if we can do some incentive that we wouldn't have to utilize that so much.
It depends on the day, depends on, you know, how many teachers are out, obviously, and so that will make a difference. We will always bring in an additional sub if we need to, if that number is big. I also, early in the morning, work with our principals and our counselors to make sure that there are extra hands on deck, so it's in the commons is where the students meet. Yeah. And then they might, if they have a large class, they might grab a counselor and pull a certain couple of classes into the tiered lecture hall or into the auditorium, and so that they, just to reduce the number of students that are in there, but that's very infrequent. Again, I think with COVID kind of in our rear view at this point, those large numbers are not happening as frequently, and kids are not in there for multiple days. I kind of have a threshold of 3 days. If we have a teacher that is out for 3 days or more, then we will look at getting a classroom sub for that teacher.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. I just heard some, pros and cons to the situation, so I just want to check and see how it's going.
And Amy, it can vary even by the hour, and that's one thing when I visit the high school, I always check that out, because I know that that's somewhat of a unique system. I think more schools are going to a system like that. And I will tell you that Mrs. Stokes does a great job keeping it organized, but it also goes to show how important it is that our teachers are planning and that they're doing a good job using Google Classroom, because I think the teachers that are putting good lessons on Google Classroom, I think they're seeing more success than some. And some classes are more suited for that type of situation than others. But I think the growth that we've seen with our teachers using Google Classroom has led to that being even more successful. But it also comes down to the student. Some students, they're self-motivated and, they can take that 47 minutes or however much work time they have and they can get a lot done. Other students don't. But you would also see similar situations in the classroom with a sub.
And one thing too, I'll quickly point out on the grid below, and Dale, you had asked about the teacher subs or new subs in particular. This year we had 22 new substitute teachers come in, which is quite a bit larger than anything that we've seen over the last 5 years. So we certainly did have more people added to our pool than what we have in previous years.
I just wanted to ask a little bit more about the exit survey. I'm a survey enthusiast. And I was wondering if you ever considered having some sort of incentive for filling out that, because if someone's had a bad experience, I mean, 27 statistically, that's an awesome response. But if we're particularly trying to capture anybody who's had negative experiences or things like that, on their way out, might not be the moment that they're strongly motivated to fill out things to give more information to the district. Sure. So I'm wondering if there's any sort of thing that's been tried, or if we could think about just to kind of snag all that information.
Mostly just communication and, you know, kind of letting them know how important it is and how much we value their feedback. So I have not explored that, but that certainly is something that we can look into and try to incentivize staff members to complete the exit survey to get that info. Absolutely. Thank you.
Another follow on those lines is, I know some places have someone outside of the traditional HR or management structure do the surveys, because often if there has been tension or something that's been frustrating for the former employee, unfortunately, you might be the last person they want to talk to, right? I know some organizations do either have someone from a different division or someone with familiarity of the district, or just someone from the outside entirely who they kind of have an arrangement with to do those exit reviews.
Yeah, and that is something we can look into too. I know that comes with a cost, and you may get an actual monetary cost, but then there's the other, like you said, the other flip side of it. I do find that people tend to be quite honest, and so if they didn't have a great experience, they will tell us, and I appreciate that. In fact, this year, we had a principal and I went and met with someone who had particularly a kind of a situation happen, and we followed up, and just in that conversation learned a lot about what we can do to better support staff in those situations.
Just an interesting observation in the table. While the total number of subs is at the top and it catches the attention, teachers with a degree as subs has changed very, very little for the last few years. Kind of the before times of COVID, 43, 41, 36, 39, very within 3 or 4. Teachers without a degree dropped off when COVID started. And then paraeducators dropped off considerably during COVID and hasn't recovered by 25%. So just kind of understanding where the shortage is in which role. I mean, they're all very important, but that just kind of jumps out at me.
Yeah, and that makes sense, because I think of the workforce opening up a little bit more. Those that have a teaching specific career path, we're looking in other areas as well. Where if I have a teaching degree and a teaching license, I'm going to go to the school system and look for work there. So absolutely, and we can always use more subs in general, but specifically paraeducator subs. That is a hard job, and so the para subs that we have do an excellent job and very appreciative. But that is one of the areas that we would really like to see an increase, because I'm pretty sure that most days we go at least without filling at least one of those positions, if not more. Thank you. Next, we have our social emotional learning screener for 23-24.
So part of the district's work plan for this past school year was to investigate and select a screening tool by June 30th. So appreciate the work that Tonya and the team of educators here did throughout the year. Tony will share the information now with the board.
All right, so as you're aware, we do screen for ELA and math, but we haven't widely screened for social emotional learning. We do have pockets of that is happening in our district, but there hasn't been maybe a consistent tool that everyone is using. So a team of us kind of got together. There was individuals on that team were school counselors, school social workers, school psychologists, principals, teachers that were a part of that team. And we looked at different tools. I listed the 4 big tools that we looked at. The team really decided to go with a satchel pulse. One of the big things we were really looking at is the usability for classroom teachers. We did not want this to be necessarily significantly more work for teachers. We wanted teachers to be able to use something that was simple, quick, and that would give them data in order to support the students within their classroom. Really how I see this tool used is, especially in our elementary, we have what we call wait time, so what I need. And so kids get kind of split up during that time. Some kids get academic support, they might get support in math, some get support in reading, some get, they are, if they need their learning stretched during that time, that can happen. This tool will help teachers kind of define for them the students that may struggle in a particular area. So for example, if you have a group of students that are reporting that they struggle with making friends, you could create a group during that time to talk about things like conversation starters. How do you join a group that's playing outside? If you have a conflict with a student, how can you resolve that conflict? And really kind of focus their kind of targeted responses to students who may define themselves as struggling in an area. This is not intended to be diagnostic. We're not diagnosing anything with this tool. It truly is a screener to give us some ideas of directions of what we want to do with our students in regards to social emotional.
Tony, if I could just jump in for a second, and I know we heard some comments earlier on, and what I'd like to say is that I can understand the concern, and I can understand some of the rhetoric that has come forward when talking about this, but until you've been in a classroom with young kids these days, until you've coached Little League, or until you've coached soccer or whatever, I don't think many people recognize how many challenges our young kids have. And this is an important tool for our staff members so that we can best serve our kids. And we have always said in Menomonie that we take a whole child approach, and certainly, the academics and what we're doing with our core areas are critically important for the future success of our students. But we also are trying to help our students be able to manage their emotions and be productive members of the school community. You would not believe how many students need assistance in order to be in the traditional educational setting. I don't think someone who's not been in the school in the past decade or two really has understanding of the challenges that our teachers face. And I think our teachers have done a marvelous job. I think this will help our teachers do an even better job being able to help our kids. This isn't about profiling, it's not about creating records, it's none of that stuff. This is simply trying to serve kids to the best of our ability.
Does anybody have any questions?
Not a question, but more of an observation that it makes complete sense that we try and incorporate something standardized. Because while our teachers and staff have had to try and figure all these needs out one at a time, I would want to know that my kid has a consistent approach being applied. So once the approach is there, the survey is there, you can see the survey, you can ask the teacher, understand what's going on. But to me, that feels a lot better than not having a consistent approach.
I really appreciate that your, I don't know if I should call it a report, your PDF here started with a very clear definition of SEL, and I really appreciate that. I think that, when we start to understand this as about helping kids develop that social awareness, relationship skills, self-awareness and management and decision-making, like this is. And so I also know in a room full of kids, like how much is on that classroom teacher to be managing so much going on with all those kids.
And just to add one more thing, this is not something that, we read some magazine article about, or we heard something on the TV and all of a sudden we thought, oh, this would be a great idea for Menomonie. If you go back to 2018 and the hundreds of surveys that we sent out to family and community members, the number of listening sessions we had and work sessions that we had in the development of our strategic plan, this was clearly identified by our community as a need in our schools. And I just think that's important to know, because I know there is a lot of media out there, and I know there is a lot of talking points that scares people and makes people think that this is part of some, grand scheme. And I understand that. But when you really look at the work that went into this and the development of our strategic plan and people identifying how we can best serve our kids, this has been a long-standing item that has been worked on over a long amount of time. And I think this is something that we'll certainly need to continue to evaluate, but I think it has the potential to be very helpful in our schools.
Is this something that the board will have to vote on?
We use a variety of screeners in our school, and no, this is more informational for the board. I mean, certainly the board has the authority to, manage whatever the board wants. I would not advise the board to get into the business of selecting screeners and choosing curriculums and things like that. So this is more informative from our perspective, but we also recognize where we stand in the hierarchy of the school district.
There was a question raised about data privacy essentially earlier, and I assume this information fits in the same laws as test results and the kids' student health records at the student nurse's office.
And we'll be working with technology to make sure that information is
Secure.
It's a student record. Yeah, it would be considered the same as we would consider any other student record.
I'd just like to say that I did read the email that we got about, and the one thing that I noted with the school district that was sampled was that they did have an opt-out plan. So doesn't mean that your child is forced to do it if they don't want to. I don't want to advertise that more huge, but I think that there's always that that can happen, and I think we have that with a lot of our things that we do for students. If you don't want your student to do it, don't have them do it. If you don't want them to read a book, don't have them read it, but don't ruin it for the rest of the people that may need those resources. Thank you.
And two, just quick questions. One is, how often would this be administered to measure change and to measure if the intervention support is making a difference?
The team that I worked with really looked at twice a year. It can be done more frequently if we want to. If you have a group of students and you want to see some more progress, those particular students could receive the survey more often, but initially we would be looking at twice a year.
And then also in terms of accessibility, does this particular program have setups to offer different languages or other
Yep, it does. Yep. And then what it is it's really a toggle. So the student would toggle through the Likert scale. Lower grades, it has like emojis, so like happy face, so it uses that. It's very well versed in that, probably more than I am. Yes, and we talked about the accessibility to have it to the students, all of that. Yep, that was an important piece of this. Yeah.
I seem to recall that there's an SEL component of this data assessments. Is that right? I remember reviewing these in my PTO last spring. The Title I reports, is that right? I apologize for creating details, but there's an assessment done, at least at River Heights, on social emotional learning and how this would or wouldn't integrate with that.
So, as part of the state assessment, there is not, different buildings have different building goals where they have, as part of their SLO process, where they have been doing some work similar to this or in this nature, that like Carl was saying, this would help us to streamline that process. Okay, thanks.
Okay. No other comments? Questions? Okay, Moving on to review strategic planning goals and major activities for 2022-23.
So this is the last school board meeting for the 2022-2023 school year. It's amazing. It just goes by in the snap of a finger. And to think about it, I mean, if you think back to the numbers, especially the ones, that were on the board at this time last year, the board created a work plan that had, I believe, 34, whatever number of initiatives. And I'm very proud of the work that our teachers and staff members and students and principals and directors have done, partnering with our families and with our community to have so much success and so much progress in our schools. I'm not going to sit here and read the 6-page report of everything that's done with multiple links to examples, but like I said, I'm very proud of the work that was done. I think we have advanced our school district along the path of the strategic plan that was set out for us. I think the board was very wise in the work plan that was set up. I do think it was smart that the board allowed for a few things to be placed on hold based on capacity of our staff, and we all know that capacity has been a concern, especially in the last couple of years coming off the pandemic. But if there's anything specific that board members want me to speak to, I will, or if you have any questions, I will, but I guess my main point is that I'm very proud of the work of our school district on this work plan. Anybody?
The health education report, it says that'll be presented to the board by June 30th.
So, which color is that in there? Color 1?
Health education faculty committee.
It's on the first page.
Is that the report we just heard?
The health and PE.
Yep, I can speak to that. So that report is linked in, the health program review summary is linked in, was included in this document. If you click the link, it's a summary of the outcomes of the work that team has done. Like the 4K program review, it's a piece that is embedded into the document.
Okay. I'm sorry, I missed that link there. I'll check that link out.
Yep.
Sorry.
And what I can say without going into a lot of detail is that throughout the course of the year, the health staff met, identified priorities, and developed a 3-year work plan to make improvements and take next steps over the next 3 years for becoming more consistent and making some updates where they were identified in need.
Okay.
I would just say thank you to the boards that preceded this board and the community, and this has aged well, right? I mean, looking back, hey, we lived through a pandemic and all this, and there's not a thing on that work plan where I look at it and say, well, that was a stupid thing to do. So, I mean, it really kudos to the people that put it in motion and got it going.
So when do we start another process?
Well, Rachel and I have been talking about it, and I know the board has had some preliminary discussions as well. And as you know, the board is going to work on my annual evaluation tonight, and oftentimes that annual evaluation includes some goals. And one thing that I would caution the board, and I know I've said this in the past, looking to next year, especially with capacity and with the potential need of a referendum, I think the board is going to have to be a little more selective. We also know that our strategic plan is getting to the end of its current life, and I think developing another strategic plan is something that is kind of its work plan on its own. So, to your point's well taken. That this is the opportunity for the board to provide direction for the district, and I look forward to doing that with the board this summer.
Thank you.
So that will probably be in one form or another discussion item on the agenda of the summer. Any other questions or comments about the major goals? All right. Next, we have calendar of board reports for 2023-24.
I appreciate Jenny putting this together, and as the board knows, there's a number of reports, like the E4E report that we heard earlier from Mr. Sterry. There's a number of reports that come to the board regularly, annually, quarterly, what be it. And Jenny did a good job going back through previous agendas and previous years and tried to map out what the board can expect in terms of a calendar of board reports. We started sharing this a few years back, and I think it's been beneficial. I do need to point out, though, that there needs to be flexibility in this calendar. A lot of it has to do with, the timing of the work, and every year is a little bit different, but this gives you a general idea of what you can expect each month. But this also is an opportunity if the board would like to request any additional reports or changes to how we do things. Is there anything at this time that board members would like to point out? It's pretty comprehensive.
I think we do sort of get, I guess I don't see it. Do we get like a title services report?
Yes, there is a report that includes information about ESEA and title services. I'm trying to recall the name and when it is.
I was just thinking, Abe has referenced some of the reports I think that you get as a parent. And for me, thinking back to some of the reports, I was able to see that I think maybe our guidance counselors, in collaboration with the title put together, like some of that information was very, what?
Revealing.
Well, yes. And I think really good to see, especially when looking at the actual achievement and reading levels and where support is going and that sort of thing. So I would be interested in getting a little more of that somewhere.
Right. We can take a look and get back. Is there anything you want to add right away?
Well, what I was going to say is, at the building level, they do title planning meetings that start planning for what those services look like. And there are a series of parent meetings that go along with that. But then once the state achievement results are publicly released at the end of each summer and going into fall, we do come forward and provide a student achievement report each fall, as opposed to a specific building title report. But like Joe was saying, if there's something in more detail that we would like to see specific to title services, we can look at that. Not all of our buildings are title eligible, so it wouldn't be comprehensive of all of our buildings.
Yeah, I think it's the November student achievement reports is what I was alluding to.
Yeah, I think even if there, wasn't someone here from each location to dive into it, like even being able to see the reports that they've made and sent out, I think for use with parents, that would be helpful. I have a weird question. Is there anything on here that you feel like, or anyone feels like is like, could be like culled from it? Because there is so much, I'm just curious. I guess mostly, if Joe feels like there's something that is, I don't know, repetitive or whatever, but.
Let me take a look at that, Dominique, and we can come back with some more information for you and the board with both your questions.
I think looking at the list, it can seem overwhelming, and it's important to remember, or helpful to me to remember that some of these actually we don't spend a ton of time on. Some of them we spend more time on than others.
I think it's good. It's a really nice list, and I appreciate Jenny for putting it all together. What I'd like to just say is that the more reports you have like this for the community to hear, I think that makes us much more transparent to the community, so they know exactly what is happening in our district.
I agree with Dominico. If there's something that can come up, we should recognize the culture that lets you take it off and not force you to keep banging your head on the wall if it's not.
Well, especially if I'm gonna, ask for more to be added, I just feel like it's always good to look through and make sure we feel like everything's necessary.
Yeah, so really like these comments.
It's also important, I think, to note that if there's something that's not on here that we don't notice today, as we, look at this calendar, it doesn't mean you couldn't, down the road ask for it with a, fair amount of notice, correct?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like every year one or two things gets added, and a lot of that is through the work plan itself. I do think we, obviously have to be selective, but this is kind of the general schedule of what to expect.
Great, thank you so much, Debbie. And next, we have legislative advocacy. We have nothing in background of this tonight. Do you want to say anything? Does anyone want to say anything?
I have a very brief question, not the answer now, but to think about. Among the many, many bills that have been kind of up and down, there was the one bar reading that passed last week. And I don't expect an answer now, but as you think ahead about how that impacts our curriculum and our planning for the coming years, I'd like to hear down the line as you kind of process what that means, how that's going to affect us. Because it is, I know it's softer than the original version of the bill, what actually passed, but is also maybe pretty significant change to how reading would be done at certain pages. So.
Yeah, we were actually talking about today during our directors meeting a little bit, and certainly everyone's studying it to try to figure it out. And when we get the information, we'll share it.
All right, review of extracurricular staff contract requests, of which we have none. Items related to next meeting dates, our next regular board meeting is July 10th, special board meeting July 24th. And it's not listed here, but coming up in August, we'll have our annual meeting. And I would like to propose that we take a 5-minute recess and come back to move into closed session.